All right, everyone. Venezuela continues to worsen. A few days ago, they announced electricity rationing. There have been looters, untold numbers of them in all of their largest cities. And I spoke about this. Interestingly, normally looters, they take like food and shit like that or break open a cash register. Now, though, they're stripping out carpet and even, like, removing windows and shit because anything physical is worth more than the currency. So if they're already mobbing the place, they will literally, like, rip the entire place apart. A piece of wood can have more value than its weight in bolivars, so there's no reason not to carry off whatever you can get. It doesn't matter. A handful of dust is probably worth more than a bolivar now. But anyway, the U.S. is doing the same thing. Remember when Pompeo came out and I said, well, when he said that Maduro was illegitimate, when he officiated that sort of statement. I think he was in Korea at the time when he made the statement too, which was, or Vietnam, I can't remember which. I said that marked a major shift in U.S. diplomacy, the way in which we speak about Venezuela, and that you could expect major things to happen. And of course, immediately after that, Guaido declares himself, El Presidente. Maduro cracks down, protests spiral out of control, there's no electricity, and they've basically, the economy has collapsed in Venezuela. That happened immediately after. It was obvious that was a seismic shift in U.S. policy towards the state of Venezuela. Now you have a similar shift, which is that I believe for the first time, the U.S. is now seriously optioning freeing up aid, literally freeing up aid to Venezuela if the Maduro regime collapses, and also to its neighbors in case of refugee movements as well. I do support this. Now, here's the thing. I don't believe in U.S. interventionism. I believe that the Americas should remain peaceful. But the Maduro regime has been on the edge of collapse for years anyway, and socialists will tell you that's because of a CIA coup, like the U.S. sanctions caused this problem. That is not true. It wasn't until this year, and Maduro's regime has had economic problems for a lot longer than fucking 2019. Until early this year, there were no measurable U.S. sanctions on Venezuela. They lie constantly and constantly talk about how there were. The sanctions that they are talking about were aimed at a very small number of inside party loyalists, Maduro's inner circle, and their private holdings. That's a drop in the bucket compared to the Venezuelan economy, and it didn't even touch the oil, which is their main export. So that's a bunch of bullshit. Socialism collapsed the system there because of oil prices falling. What happened, the long and short of the story of Venezuela, the sad story of their economy, is that Chavez's economic miracle that Solon applauded and spoke so much about 10 years ago was a bunch of bullshit. What he was doing was borrowing money against oil sales. The problem is he borrowed more money than he was actually selling in oil. It created debt. And the idea was that as long as the oil kept flowing, it didn't really matter because you can pump more of it, the price is high, it's very efficient, you have a lot of it because basically half of Venezuela is a giant pond of oil below ground level, and so there was no problem. Nobody expected the oil prices to plummet. They had already borrowed years' worth of oil sales on debt, on paper, at interest, loans, especially from China and from Russia. Some of them have been forgiven. I think the Europeans forgave $1 billion in debt recently. The U.S. has forgiven some debt as well, I believe. They borrowed that money, and it didn't make sense because what's happened now is the Venezuelan economy has shrunk. It's far smaller now because oil prices are down so much lower. That has caused a ripple effect in other industries there as well. Maduro pissed off a lot of foreign investors who fled, like when he nationalized that, a Coca-Cola factory and some automotive manufacturers, which he's freed back up in some cases, but it's like when your factory's only able to work for 10 hours a day, 3 days a week or something because of electrical rationing, what's the fucking point of it even being open? Maduro and Chavez are responsible for this problem. Chavez more than Maduro. He's the one that set the stage by creating a centrally intervened in economy that didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to have perpetual oil debt and just say, well, the oil prices will never fall, so it doesn't really matter now, does it? It was a dumb mistake. The sort of mistake made in centrally planned systems without a large amount of economic diversity. That's the long and short of it. Has nothing, they're trying to say now, well, it was U.S. sanctions. Or no, Venezuela's not actually socialistic. Now, keep in mind that every left-wing policy proposed here on steroids is already there, but they're capitalistic. They're like right-wing and shit. Yeah, Maduro calls himself a socialist. These people call themselves socialists. They enact socialism, but it's not really socialism. It's very, very interesting how once the system begins to collapse, it stops being real socialism. It's invariable. You know, Bernie Sanders pretty much got Maduro's endorsement, and there's a reason why he's losing some support. It's not just Beto, dude. And yeah, the dude who eats magic dirt. Yeah, he's a real threat, real challenger. Part of it's just Bernie Sanders is a fucking loser, fucking socialist. It's long and short of it. No. This is a major shift because I don't think there's been a period before in which the U.S. actively planned for Venezuela to collapse. But it appears what's actually happening. Like Maduro's response to Guaido's gaining support is to ban him from holding office. Well, it doesn't. If you say, well, he's not allowed to hold office for 15 years, your government has been declared illegitimate by half the world. It doesn't matter if you declare he can't hold office. In Venezuela, it's one of those sad tin horn dictatorship-style cases where whoever ends up with the guns behind them gets to make the rules. If Guaido comes in and becomes an authoritarian, and he will, it'll be because Maduro set the stage for him to do so. And Maduro reigning over bullshit, the stage was set by Chavez. It all goes back to him and his stupid revolutionary activities, engaging in an economic system that never made sense to begin with and makes even less sense now today. Socialism was never more viable than when it first started to get implemented a long ago, back when people were pre-industrial in most cases. Then you could make a case for it in some cases. Doesn't make any sense now. With the data revolution that's here, you need less centrality, dude. Even the less intervening governments, like maybe a U.S., Australia or something, even they're too hyper-regulated and centralized. We simply don't need, we're outgrowing government on the same level that it's been implemented. Doesn't make me an ANCAP, it makes me a monarchist. We literally don't need more than a technical night watchman state plus a few, fixtures thereupon. I do believe in the most rudimentary level of organization for medical and educational purposes, among other things. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot government offers us anymore. Just sort of wastes money. It's central. Whenever something is centralized, whenever there's a a middleman involved in a transaction, which is government, and usually there's 5 or 6 of them because you've got bureaus and state and local and all this bullshit, it makes it less efficient. It simply does. You need to limit their power far more. Venezuela is among the most hyper-centralized economies. That is socialism. In fact, it's socialism that has veered off toward more and more towards communism as Maduro has absorbed more and more power for himself. He has ignored the legislature and he is ignoring the courts. He is not a legitimate leader. And for Trump and Pompeo and these others to say, well, if it collapses, yes, we will help you and we'll help your neighbors because there's going to be massive refugee movements to the tune of hundreds of millions, I think is proper. I don't believe in U.S. intervention, but if the regime's going to collapse anyway, what the hell are we going to do? If we don't help their neighbors, those refugees will come here largely. The people that'll flee will be the least socialistic among them. People like all of the dissident capitalists pretty much have fled already because they're like the front line of being shot at. You got to realize Guaido's people are mostly socialists too. If Venezuela, let's say that the Maduro regime collapses tomorrow. I can't say this enough. Let's say that Maduro gets shot, he gets ousted by his generals, something happens and he's gone. Guaido comes in. His party is not right-wing. It is simply less left-wing. It's like going from Bernie Sanders policies to Elizabeth Warren policies. It's not that different. It is very slightly less socialistic, and that's really about it. It's a sad situation ultimately for them, but we may have to free up some aid. I don't believe we should enter, like with troops, or especially now that Russia's there, it'd be a bad idea to send U.S. forces. But we can send U.S. money and show them, hey, look, you're still you're in the American continent. Yeah, we're gonna help you out because socialism's fucked up. That's about all. Peace out.